In this video, we are having a conversation with our inner critic, the internal voice that sends judgmental messages and prevents us from being self-compassionate. This will introduce us to the practice of compassion in mindfulness. Why is it essential to cultivate it? How can we become more self-compassionate? And what exactly will this practice bring into our everyday lives? Let's do this. Hello there! Welcome back to our channel. So good of you to visit. I am Liz, and as you know by now, at Earthshine Collective, we support your conscious evolution through this series on emotional well-being. Let's face it, life can be quite challenging sometimes, and the reactions we have towards our shortcomings are merciless. Our thoughts are either constructive, contributing to active problem solving and reflecting a high level of self-acceptance, or they are the complete opposite, causing us to freeze and/or berate ourselves and destroying our overall sense of worth. These harsh judgments about ourselves are often an automatic response to our limitations, whereas forgiveness and grace are nowhere to be found, which is curious, seeing that it's precisely in this grace and compassion that all power to transform our current unpleasant situation resides. The good news is that we can expand compassion through practice. Before we begin unraveling our inner critic, imagine yourself in a situation where you were disappointed in yourself. For instance, you believed that you made a mistake, failed to reach an important goal, or broke a promise you made to yourself. Whatever it is, just think of a situation where you felt disappointed in yourself. You got it? Good. Now that you have tapped into that thought, let's practice some self-reflection by answering a few simple questions. Do you recall the words you spoke to yourself back then? What kind of inner dialogue were you using? What was the tone of that inner voice? Can you describe the way you talk to yourself? And finally, how did it make you feel? How did you feel as a result of the way you were talking to yourself? If you are like most people doing this exercise, you will find that your words were mostly accusatory, full of scolding and criticism. We use such words because we're very aware that we did something that we interpret to be wrong, so we reprimand ourselves, which reflects the words we use. Our tone of voice is often harsh and angry, and we experience feelings of failure, shame, guilt, inferiority, and fear. This internal critic uses sentences like, "What's wrong with me? How could I let this happen? Why me? There's nothing I can do right. If I continue this, I will inevitably fail. I'm a fool." These phrases are typical examples of self-critical thoughts. They're all in our minds and nobody else hears them. That is until we are in a more social setting. When we're surrounded by people, these critical thoughts find their expression in words like, "I look like a Michelin doll in this dress. I have the worst sense of direction of anyone I know. I am the worst cook on this planet. Why do I keep making the same mistakes? I am so stupid." When we pay close attention to the thoughts that we say out loud, it is as if we are saying to those around us, "I am going to beat you to the punch and criticize myself before you can. I recognize how flawed and imperfect I am, so you don't have to cut me down and tell me what I already know." We're saying to them, "Okay, I'm not perfect. I know. I'm aware of it." That is the voice of our inner critic. Our inner critic is an internal voice that commands and sends demeaning messages. It stems from shame, a feeling seeded during our formative years as we navigate the rules that society has prescribed and abided by our caregivers. As a matter of fact, there's research on children with parents who are highly critical and focused on control and performance that shows they too will grow up to be very self-critical, cementing this berating voice through their interactions with those around them. The cycle shapes their inner dialogue and forms the foundation for believing they are flawed and unworthy of love or belonging unless they follow the rules or excel at everything they do. Interesting fact, Did you know the self-critical voice in your head often mimics the tone of voice or even the sound of the voice of one of your parents? So what purpose does shame serve? We use shame to correct behaviors and fall in line with society's expectations. Therefore, most of our inner critic messages fall into three types. The first one is related to expectations expressed by the shoulds. You should do better, you should try harder, you should work faster. It's exhausting just to keep up. The second one reflects our perception of our innate value and involve messages about disapproving thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. For instance, it's weak to feel this way, this behavior is unacceptable, people may think you are incapable or lazy, you're not good enough. And the final one is about predictions, specifically threatening ones. If you continue like this, you will be a failure. Or if you keep this up, nobody will love you anymore and you will end up alone. These are the most common expressions we can expect from our inner critic. They can take many forms, yet the strength of our critical self is dependent on how much we reinforce it. When we fail at something, most of us engage in the kind of internal dialogue that aims to punish ourselves and put us down, which can be demotivating and anxiety-inducing. This critical voice creates internal conflict, emphasizing the gap between who we think we are and who we think we're supposed to be. This in turn leads to uncomfortable feelings of frustration and guilt because we're not good enough, or fear because we might never be good enough. We can quickly lose ourselves in an endless and destructive cycle of feelings of shame and thoughts brought to us by our critical voice. The only way to break away from this cycle is to practice self-compassion. But why is self-compassion so effective? When they hear the word self-compassion, some people say things like, I need a very strong critical voice because I fear that if I start to practice self-compassion, I will not be motivated enough to address my weaknesses. I will become lazy, basically. And to that, I must say that when I experience a high level of self-criticism, I don't feel very energized, but rather I feel like I'm being hurt. And because I feel like I'm hurt, I feel small. I don't feel good about myself. And I'm not motivated or confident enough about myself either. On the other hand, when I practice self-compassion, I notice that I create more space within me for something new. There's less mental chatter and a need for social approval. Instead of focusing on other people, I am more attuned to my inner world and feel more autonomous in my motivation, which to me signals more personal agency. The louder our self-critical voice, the harder it is to be open to self-compassion. That is because this practice makes us vulnerable to the feelings of anger and frustration that our critical voice feeds off of. These feelings are seen as action markers of fear, taking the form of self-attack characterized by the need to punish and judge ourselves. In this mindset, the image of our complete self is very negative, and we use words like, I am useless, I'm a screw-up, I never do anything right, shame on me. Our inner critic may want what is best for us, but is trying to increase motivation in a hurtful and unproductive manner by focusing on identifying threats, like if you don't work hard enough, you will lose your job, monitor weaknesses or mistakes, like you messed this up again. Through commands, you should stop acting like a fool. And judgment. You're just weak. There's also a strong focus on prevention to avoid re-experiencing pain and the fear of failing again in the future. In contrast, when we want to improve ourselves in a self-compassionate way, we see a completely different picture. Rather than wishing to torture and berate ourselves, we become aware of a strong desire to grow as a human being and to learn to let go of what does not serve that growth. The dominant emotion is no longer anger but support. It's the realization that we need to give ourselves room to grow for our lessons, for we would not be able to do so otherwise. Instead of the black and white mentality of the I messed up, I am a complete failure, in opening ourselves up to self-compassion, we zoom in to our experience to observe what is causing our suffering, looking at the whole event as an extension of our identity as human beings and not just a perception of our shortcomings. The focus of self-compassion is very much on growth and trust in ourselves rather than the fear of failure. Without its support, the chances of conflict and hence suffering are very high. More support means to be more loving and kind to ourselves. In this way, we're less likely to get trapped in a downward spiral of emotional thinking that attracts automatic thoughts such as, "What's wrong with me?" or "How could I ever let this happen?" The compassionate voice is kind, it's caring, accepts things as they are, and recognizes how certain perspectives only lead to suffering. It says, "What happened has happened. You're human, just like everyone else. Pain is inevitable, yet suffering is a choice, and you can choose to learn from this and do better next time." Through the lens of self-compassion, every moment is another moment to start all over again. Instead of turning ourselves into a scapegoat, self-compassion helps us forgive ourselves and break our negative self-talk loop. It is through the practice of self-compassion that we silence our inner critic. Now, you may be wondering, how can we cultivate that approach towards ourselves? Stay tuned for the following video to find out. For now, please like, share, and subscribe if you want more content like this. Thank you so much for being here, and until next week, stay healthy, stay sane, and stay safe.